Okay, that is live. Okie dokie. Great. All right, we're in business today. Goodness. Okay, we'll say a quick prayer. Our Father in heaven, we come before you in prayer this morning. Very thankful for the opportunity to study your word. We pray that you please be with us and join us, open our hearts and minds as we read through and finish the book of Daniel. We ask that you please bless us with understanding and with wisdom. And we pray for those who are not with us now that we look forward to the time that we can see them again. And until that time, we pray that you'll be with them and keep them safe on their journeys. For it is in your Son's name that we pray. Amen. Okay, so this time we will be able to look at the map that we tried to look last week. So there is, of course, a lot of disagreement on disagreement, speculation, opinions, whatever you want to call it, about the end of Daniel chapter 11 and Daniel chapter 12. Some people have even suggested that the demarcation for chapter 12 actually should have been a few verses ahead. So basically positing that chapter 11 should have ended a reason. And it makes the most sense to me that the end of chapter 11 and chapter 12 are essentially a recap of everything that Daniel has been told. Because keep in mind, an angel is telling him this stuff. So he gets this vision, he's sitting there, the angel explains everything to him. And then what makes sense to me is that at the end of that explanation, the angel essentially recaps it, doubles down on the fact that it's going to be tumultuous, it's going to be troublesome, but Michael, your angel, will be there to guard you and to help you and your people through it. And that's essentially how the angel's speech ends, or his description of everything ends in chapter 12. And so, just to recap, the end of chapter 11, again, this is the English Standard Version. At the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind with chariots and horsemen. These are the last 5 verses of chapter 11. With chariots and horsemen and with many ships, and he shall come into countries and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall. But these shall be delivered out of his hand, Edom and Moab, and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and silver, and of all the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. That summarizes perfectly exactly what happens with Antiochus IV.
Right. Yeah, I think we discussed that
We
last
did.
week, saying that I even agreed that it was kind of recapping what happened in, over in 25, where it talks about the king of the south.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it just seems like you would have to strain to come up with another period in history that fits these verses. And I think that's why it's so misunderstood, is because so many people will read through, and we're used to reading, especially Western culture, we're used to reading like a narrative flow as though chapter 2 always comes after chapter 1. And there are, of course, books that they like break it up. Even movies will, here's what's happening over here, and then meanwhile, this is what's happening. But this just seems like it's a recap, a summarization. And it makes sense because you would want to recap that, because this whole thing, I don't know how long the angel talked. But if we were to just read through Daniel chapter 11, it would probably only take us 10 or 15 minutes. And
Right.
So if you're talking to somebody and you download that amount of history on them in 10 minutes, you kind of want a Cliff Note version of that,
Mhm.
which makes sense.
Yeah.
So a lot of people think that this is some type of prophecy of something that's going to happen in the future. Yeah. And there isn't anything, I don't think that the text supports that. In the context of the text, I don't think supports that this is somehow still a future prophecy. It seems to me like it describes Antiochus pretty perfectly.
Mhm.
And then we, of course, flow into, oh yeah, there's the map. We'll flow into Daniel chapter 12. This map, I don't know if you spent any time with that map there. It's tiny in that thing. It's much easier to see up here. But this is essentially what it's describing. Okay, so at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him. King of the north shall rush upon him as a whirlwind, and he does, with chariots, horsemen, many ships. If you'll recall, Antiochus essentially takes all of Egypt except for Alexandria. And then he hears about what's going on in Jerusalem. He leaves to go back to Jerusalem. And that's right in this, I guess it would be the early 160s. And then, he shall come into the glorious land. Tens of thousands shall fall. Over the span of 3 days, if you'll recall, he killed 40,000 people, enslaved another 40,000. So tens of thousands. But these shall be delivered out of his hand, Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. Those are all folks that live over here, not folks that he attacked. So they're delivered. They're not, and I think that's what it's saying. So he shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He comes back to Egypt for a second time, does the same thing again, gets all the way to Alexandria, and that's when the Roman Gaius Lanus Pompilius meets him and basically draws a line in the sand around him and tells him to go home. And he does. And after that, that's when he goes back to Jerusalem. That's when he ransacks the temple. He shall become ruler of the treasures of gold and silver and all the precious things of Egypt. That happens. Libyans and Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and north shall alarm him. He shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. He shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain, a reference to Jerusalem, and yet he shall come to his end with none to help him, which eventually does happen to him. But if we were to continue that summarization, and let's say that chapter 12 isn't where it's at, and you just read it through, and let's see, yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince who has charge of your people, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. This is a unique position for the Jews to be in, because they're dealing with a very powerful empire, a very furious ruler, and the Jews themselves have divided themselves into two different sects. You have essentially like the traditional Jewish leaders and way of life and being, and then the Hellenistic Jews. Those are the corruptible group of Jews that essentially Antiochus leverages to control the population. And the priest that Antiochus sets up is a guy named Jason, and following Jason is a guy named Menelaus. They essentially purchase the priesthood for money. They buy it. And they're Hellenistic Jews, and they were they were a driving force behind the Hellenization of the temple. That's when the statue of Zeus was set up, pigs were sacrificed, pig's blood everywhere, brothels, like it was about as departed from Jewish tradition as you could possibly be. Such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But at that time your people shall be delivered, everyone whose name shall be found written in the book, and many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, and some to shame. Those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the sky above, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. But you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. A little bit murky, with the language. And it's easy to see how, if you were to just read this and take it at face value, it seems like, oh, well, he's talking about when we think book in this context, we often think book of life, right? Well, something to keep in mind is that this is a prophecy that's given to a Jew, to Daniel. So what would that phrase found written in the book and again, shut the words and seal the book, what would those phrases have meant to somebody like Daniel? Well, we see that often prophecies given by God are referred to as books or scrolls. We see that in Isaiah chapter 29, and I'll read a couple of verses. So Isaiah chapter 29 is essentially God pronouncing destruction upon Jerusalem. Not shocking because of some of the ways that they have conducted themselves. And so this is a prophecy that God's giving to Isaiah. And at the end of that prophecy, this is Isaiah chapter 29, verse 9. Stay yourselves in wonder, cry ye out and cry. They are drunken, but not with wine. They stagger, but not with strong drink. For the Lord hath poured out upon you the spirit of deep sleep, and hath closed your eyes, the prophets and your rulers, the seers he hath covered. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. So the vision being a prophecy. So, verse 11, and the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed, which men deliver to one that is learned, saying, read this, I pray you. And that person says, I cannot, for it's sealed. And the book is delivered to him that is not learned, saying, read this. And he says, I'm not learned. Basically, the description is that the vision, that is the prophecy, is a book. And the vision of all is become unto you as the words of a book that is sealed. That is literally what we're seeing here. Everyone whose name shall be found written in prophecy, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the prophecy until the time of the end. Well, what is the time of the end? This time. At that time shall arise Michael, the great prince, who has charge of your people. There shall be a time of trouble, such as never has been since there was a nation till that time. But your people shall be delivered. And that is this prophecy. Your people will be delivered from this great evil. And that's exactly what happens. You know, we see that Antiochus, of course, dedicates the temple to Zeus. There's a whole rebellion. The rebellion is layered because you have the warring sects of the Jews, the Hellenistic Jews and the traditional Jews. The Hellenistic Jews see this as their moment in the sun. They're taking the opportunity to seize power, and they're okay with the fact that Zeus is being worshipped. Like, that's not a problem for them. But one priest, only one priest, Matthias, leads a rebellion. That rebellion becomes the Maccabean revolt. And I think that every indication of these verses points to that period in history. Because after that, first of all, for Jews to defeat the Seleucids is, the odds were not in their favor, let's say. And for them to do that, and then they retake the temple in a couple of years, they rededicate the temple, and as I talked about last week, that's the festival of Hanukkah. We'll chat about that in just a second. But after that, the movement, like if you can imagine if we had a political movement that seized the White House, that would legitimize them. And that's exactly what happens. The Maccabees are thought of rebels, and then they seize the temple, rededicate the temple, and a miracle happens. That gives them a huge amount of political clout. So over the next few years, the Maccabean revolt continues until about 160, when the Roman Republic recognizes them as a political force. After the Romans recognize them as a political force, that solidifies their legitimacy. And following that, they institute what we now call the Hasmonean dynasty. That is the dynasty that continues essentially until Christ. They have control. The traditional Jews retake the capital. They establish a government. That government establishes a relationship with Rome, and that's kind of the deal with the devil that they make, is that they get into bed with Rome, and that eventually will bite them. And by the time that it bites them, that's when we see Rome destroy the city in 70 AD, that Christ himself prophesied about in Matthew chapter 24. So you can see how these events kind of cascade into each other, because that would have never happened. That whole relationship with the Romans would have never happened had it not been for the Maccabean revolt. It would not have materialized, because it would have stayed under Seleucid rule. There'd be no reason for the Romans to develop a particular relationship with some rebels in some holy city that the Romans don't care about. So anyway, that to me makes the most narrative sense in terms of a prophecy, is that we're talking about a specific time in history that's going to be difficult, but that they'll make it through. And that those who, it says this, I like this phrase here, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. It's like the phrase is, let them with ears, let them hear, or like they're dull and deaf of hearing, when Christ is talking about some of the Jewish leadership during his time. Another way to describe somebody who isn't paying attention is to describe them as being asleep. So it's as if they're asleep. And when this revolt happens, they awake. And then they have a decision to make. Are we going to be part of the Hellenistic Jews, or are we going to be part of the traditional Jews and join the Maccabees? And there is a push-pull back and forth over the Maccabean revolt. It's a messy civil war, just like any civil war. It's very, very messy. You have people that choose a side and then switch, and then vice versa. And all that's described in Daniel chapter 11. And so for the angel to then recap that by saying, many of those who are not paying attention will start to pay attention. Some to life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And it's very interesting that these are the words that are used, because it doesn't seem like it's describing heaven and hell. Life and shame and everlasting contempt. The Hellenistic Jews lose, and they become this black spot in Jewish history and nothing more. Those high priests, Jason and Menelaus, they're not men that are held in high renown, everlasting contempt. So, the festival. Okay, so you remember when we talked about how there was 2 daily sacrifices in the temple? There was the sacrifice of the lamb in the morning and the sacrifice of the lamb in the evening. This is the daily sacrifice. Well, one of the other things that had to happen is the menorah had to be lit. And the menorah is described in Exodus chapter 25. So I'll read those verses. Okay. So this is Exodus chapter 25, verse 31. This section of Exodus is God giving explicit instructions on how to build the temple, how to build, well, not necessarily the temple, but the tabernacle and the garments of the priests, the various items that are to be made in the temple. The directions are very specific. So this is describing, the text calls it a candlestick. We understand it as a menorah. And thou shalt make a candlestick of pure gold. Of beaten work shall the candlestick be made. His shaft and his branches, his bowls, his knops, and his flowers shall be of the same. And 6 branches shall come out of the sides of it. 3 branches of the candlestick on one side, 3 branches of the candlestick on the other side. 3 bowls made like unto almonds, with a knop and a flower in one branch, and 3 bowls made like almonds in the other branch, with a knop and a flower. So in the 6 branches that come out of the candlestick. If you can picture a menorah, there's the central stick and 3 flanking sticks on each side. So 7 places for candles. And in the candlestick shall be 4 bowls made unto almonds, with their knops and flowers. And there shall be a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, and a knop under 2 branches of the same, according to the 6 branches that proceed out of the candlestick, describing the actual shape of the stick of gold. Their knops and branches shall be of the same. It shall be of one beaten work of pure gold, so not fused metal. That's very important. And they shall make the 7 lamps thereof, and they shall light the lamps thereof, that they may give light over against it. And the tongs thereof and the smephodish thereof shall be of pure gold. Of a talent of pure gold shall he make it, and all the vessels. And look that thou make them after their pattern, which was showed thee in the mountain. That's crazy. God is saying to Moses, make it like I showed you on the mountain. And that's just, it's amazing. So anyway, it's describing the menorah. Well, what did they do with the menorah? That is Leviticus chapter 24, which I will read. And it's amazing, that level of detail. And when we talk about some of the old law and the prophets, that level of detail is given for every single aspect of the tabernacle, eventually of the temple that Solomon builds, even the priest garments and they had certain stones and gems. The arrangement of those gems is all given in Scripture, which is a wild thing. Okay. Leviticus chapter 24. Okay. This is the first 3-4 verses of Leviticus 24. Okay, so we have a menorah. It's of a solid piece of gold. By the way, a talent of gold today is worth about a little over $4.8 million. So for one candlestick to be worth about $5 million, you can see why the temple became the envy of the world.
Right.
You know, like if one candlestick is worth that much, if I'm an enemy of Jerusalem, I'm going for the throat. I'm going for the temple. Okay, so what do we do with it? Leviticus chapter 24. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, command the children of Israel that they bring into thee pure olive oil, beaten for the light, to cause the lamps to burn continually. Without the veil of the testimony in the tabernacle of the congregation shall Aaron order it from the evening unto the morning before the Lord continually. It shall be a statute forever in your generations. He shall order the lamps upon the pure candlestick before the Lord continually. The idea is that the light, and you'll notice it says evening until morning. So all through the night, there was light in the temple, and it was lit on this, and I can't imagine it was beautiful. Candlelight that's being reflected by pure gold in the middle of the night. Like it would just buzz with this golden light. So the idea is that God is with them and fills the temple, and light has all these fun symbolic meanings. Light has all these fun symbolic meanings. The presence of God, the presence of knowledge, courage. Light has almost endless symbols attached to it. The idea is that it stays lit. It has to be lit with pure olive oil. It's a little different. Like you wouldn't go to Costco in the, Moses' time and buy a jug of pure olive oil. It wasn't like that. It had to be made by people who had been purified. That purification ritual was a minimum of 7 days. So in order for the olive oil to be considered pure, the person making the olive oil had to be pure, and then they had to go through a certain process and certain ritual to make this oil. So it's very labor intensive to make what God is describing as pure olive oil. So when the Seleucids, under Antiochus, ransack the temple, there's no more daily sacrifice, and the menorah is no longer lit. So they have fully departed from the established order that God has set up for them, that he says very clearly shall be a statute forever in your generations. All of that has ended with Antiochus taking the temple over. So when the Maccabees take it back, they take the temple. When they rededicate the temple, they're looking everywhere. This is how the story goes in the book of Maccabees. They're looking everywhere for olive oil. And they find one cruse of oil that has the signet of the high priest, that the Greeks, or the Hellenistic Jews, the Seleucids, let's call them the oppressors, that the oppressors have not used for some other purpose. So there's one cruse of oil. It's enough oil for one candle to stay lit for one day. The miracle is it lasted for 8 days. And so all the candles, the oil itself outlasted its life for 8 days. The reason the 8 is significant is because it gave the Maccabees time to purify themselves and press more oil. So it's a perfect amount of time for the oil to last. Hence the miracle. That miracle continues to be commemorated today in the Festival of Hanukkah. And that's where that festival comes from. That's why the lighting of the menorah, I personally have never participated in a Hanukkah celebration, but the center of the celebration is the menorah. And that's why. And like I said, if that had happened, you're a Jew who hasn't been paying attention, and these crazy guys are fighting over the temple. That happens, and the menorah stays lit for 8 days. You would start to pay attention. Like, oh, this is legitimate. This is sanctioned by God. And that's exactly what Daniel is predicting, or what this angel is describing to Daniel, is that it's going to be rough, but you'll be delivered. And this is what that deliverance looks like. It's that light returned to the temple. And then there was a miracle behind it. Okay. Back to Daniel. Okay. So the last few verses of Daniel chapter 12 are challenging because there's not a lot of great answers to them. And I'll explain. So this is verse 5 of chapter 12. So the angel has just told Daniel, seal up the prophecy, seal up the book. Then I, Daniel, looked, and behold, 2 others stood, one on this bank of the stream and one on that bank of the stream. And someone said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream, how long shall it be till the end of these wonders? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the stream. He raised his right hand and his left hand toward heaven, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for a time, times, and half a time, and that when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. I heard, but I did not understand. Then I said, O my Lord, what shall be the outcome of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are shut up and sealed until the time of the end. As I'm sure you can gather, there is a lot of confusion about these verses. What's up?
What word are you using?
So the text on the screen and the text in your handout is coming from the English Standard Version,
Yeah.
which reads a little bit smoother than King James, because King James makes it
It's very confusing.
very confusing. Yes. And do you mind reading those verses from your version? Your version is the New Living Translation, I think.
Yeah.
So do verses 5 through 9, because Vicky's version is really nice as well.
Then I, Daniel, looked and saw 2 others standing on opposite banks of the river. One of them asked the man dressed in linen, who was now standing above the river, how long will it be until these shocking events are over? The man dressed in linen, who was standing above the river, raised both his hands toward heaven and took a solemn oath by the one who lives forever, saying, it will go on for a time, times and half a time, when the shattering of the holy people has finally come to an end, all these things will have happened. I heard what he said, but I did not understand what he meant. So I asked, how will all this finally end, my Lord?
So, the description of the man in linen over the waters, a lot of people say that that is the figure of Christ. And the reason for that is because he swears by heaven. Nobody can swear by heaven. Nobody can do that. And this figure does. Raises both his hands and basically says it'll be for time, times, and half. That reference is a little numerical in value, and often people say that it's time would be one, times would be two, and half a time would be, of course, half of one, giving us 3.5. So 3.5 we see used to refer to finite amount of time, and it's almost always referred to finite amount of time that are not good for the people of Israel. And that's used in Daniel chapter 7. Let's see here. Verse 25. It's the Most High, and shall wear out the Most High, and think to change times and laws. And they shall be given into his hand until a time and times and the dividing of time. Basically saying, like, it's gonna suck, but it will end. You know, like, there's a lot of other ways to say it, like, but, you know, that's what it means. And it says very clearly, when the shattering of the power of the holy people comes to an end, all these things would be finished. When they restore the temple, and they restore the lighting of the menorah and return to the daily sacrifice, these things are finished because they're restored. And Daniel's like, I don't understand that. I don't get what you're saying. Which would not, I feel for Daniel a little bit, because not only did he get the download, but then he's told, like, don't worry, it won't last forever. And the shattering of the power of thy people, when it's over, everything will be fine. You would be confused. You would be confused. And Daniel is confused. And he's basically told, like, it isn't for you to know. This is sealed, which means that it's for people in the future to figure out. That would be us. You know, this is for people to look back on and go, oh, here's the fulfillment of this prophecy. This prophecy was not shared with anybody. That's the point. When he said, seal up the book, nobody knew this prophecy until these things had transpired, and then we have the ability to reflect back on them. Because a lot of confusion is derived today from the idea that this prophecy has yet to be fulfilled. And there are people that bend entire careers over trying to figure out how this prophecy fits into modern day, which defeats the purpose of everything that's been said, in my opinion. That's an opinion. Because we can look back on it and see how each blow by blow through Daniel chapter 11 and the first part of Daniel chapter 12 fit with actual historical timelines. And the person in linen, who's floating above the water and swears by heaven, which seems to me to be very Christ-like, says very plainly, when the shattering of the power of the holy people, and the shattering of the power of the holy people was when the temple was profaned, when that comes to an end, when the temple is rededicated, all these things would be finished. Guess it's right around the time that the temple is rededicated. Antiochus IV. That time ends. And then the Maccabees get political clout. They're eventually recognized by the Roman government. Of course, that ends up not being a very beneficial relationship for them in about 200 years later. But the point is that they recover their strength, they recover their temple, they recover their political standing, they get their nation back, which is exactly what's prophesied. And it would make sense that Daniel just doesn't understand that. To round the chapter out, verses 10 through 13. Many shall purify themselves and make themselves white and be refined, but the wicked shall act wickedly. and none of the wicked shall understand, but those who are wise shall understand. And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 200 or 1290 days. Blessed is he who waits and arrives at the 300 or 1335 days. But go your way till the end, and you shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. There is endless speculation as to what these numbers mean and what they refer to. The 3.5 that we talked about just a few verses earlier, if we assume that those are years, 3.5 years would be 1,260 days, according to Hebrew reckoning. So this figure, 1,290 days, is 30 days more. And then 1,335 days is 45 days from that. I'm not going to speculate over and over and over again as to how many different things they could be referring to. It seems to me that what makes the most sense with all of the prophecy that we have read, these are figures that are referring to the time that the Jews would be oppressed by Antiochus and the Seleucids, which from the time that he ransacks the temple to the time that they take it back is close to 3.5 years. Like, it's pretty much around that time frame. And I read several different scholars who say, well, you can pick any 2 points in history and bend a narrative around them to fit those numbers, right? Like if I say, well, the oppression began in March, and then 1,290 days later, this event happened. Oh, that's fulfillment. There's a lot of that. It just depends on which points of history you choose. I think it's significant in that we get essentially three different numeric values here. And I've said it before, when you see numbers, it's God saying, like, you need to pay attention. The prophecy in Daniel chapter 8 talks about basically talks about the same event. Talks about how the daily sacrifice would end for 2,200 days. We talked about that and how there seems to be an error in translation because, like, my Bible has 2,300 days. Some Bibles have 2,400 days. Some have 2,200 days. There seems to be a typography error in translation. Not uncommon for a text that is thousands of years old. So if we think about that prophecy as the cessation of the daily sacrifice lasting 1,100 days, we have that measurement, time. Then we have times, 1,290, and then a half, 335, or 1,335. We see these continual references to incomplete periods of time, or better said, times that would be finite in their duration. So it's almost as if the measurement here, no matter where you stick it, the point is it will end. This is a finite amount of time. The oppression will be finite. The cessation of the daily sacrifice will be finite. The rule by the oppressor will be finite. These are so specific numbers, or such specific numbers, 3.5, 1,290, 1,100, 1,335. The point is they can be measured and they're finite. Unlike uses of numbers like 7 and 3 and 10 and 12 that have much grander meanings behind them. 3, a holy number, the Trinity. 7, man's number 4 plus the Trinity is 7. Like, there's all these bigger concepts behind simpler numbers like 3 and 7. But these bigger numbers are very easily measured. There is no religious significance behind them. It's pointing to the fact that there's a point in time, or there's a time that will have a clear beginning and a clear end, which is exactly what happens with the Maccabean revolt. Does that line of logic make sense to y'all? How we're talking about just like the point is to Daniel, it won't last forever. You know, because he's basically been told, like, gonna get rough for you people, real rough, but it will end. You know,
I've not thought, I mean, I don't remember or know very much about Daniel until I dived into this, but seeing the words, well, the words are closed up and sealed till the time of the end. Like, to think that God, like, this is how prophecies are made.
that's how it works.
I don't know, I don't know, it's just interesting that people like Daniel can be so pivotal.
Yeah.
And like this huge writing of the prophecy just so that we can watch it be fulfilled.
Well, one of the things that the Seleucids did when they took over the temple is they burned a lot of the Jewish works. This is pure speculation, but I think that when the Jews recovered the temple and they were looking for the oil, I bet you they found this prophecy sealed up. And I could see how after a period of a certain period of time, they unfurl a prophecy and read this prophecy and go, oh. I mean, can you imagine unsealing a prophecy that's 500 years old and reading about what you did yesterday? That would blow your mind. And that seems like something that God would do. Speculation, there is zero historical corroborative evidence that would support that. But that seems reasonable.
It's like why we watch The Chosen. It's like the in between of the story. Like we got the story, but then like the way humans play out these things is very
It is different.
You can imagine like looking at the scroll and being,
Oh my goodness, your faith would explode.
Yeah.
Your faith would just absolutely explode. This ancient text written by Daniel, 500 years before any of this happens, and you read about the literally just transpired. The time of the end, right? Not the end of days, but time of the end. These are very peculiar phrases that this person in linen is using. You know, and if we understand that this person in linen is Christ, then Christ himself is essentially reassuring Daniel, like, it'll be finite, you will be delivered, and you, Daniel, will be okay. You shall rest and shall stand in your allotted place at the end of the days. Not the end of the time, the end of the days. You know, this is a reference to like the end, you know, not the end of the time. What time? The persecution time, because that's what the prophecy is all about. And we do ourselves a disservice if we don't focus on understanding our audience. Our audience is Jewish hundreds of years before this period in history. So if we see it that way, we can frame it appropriately. Any other comments about how that flows, if that makes sense? Okay, so next week, we'll dive into a big overview of the Old Law and the prophets, and we'll do that for as long as we need to do that. But then Sarah and I will be gone for a few weeks at the end of July, at the end of June, beginning of July. So we'll take a break for a little bit. Cool. That is the book of Daniel.
that much on why Christians rely so much on prophecy, or like why it's such a foundational part. Like Daniel,
Sorry,
really
you
do.
your coverage.
I don't know. Well, like some of the songs that we sing about the Daniel sings some of the songs. Yeah, I'm like, oh, I don't think that much about Daniel. Or like Brandon Lake has some songs about prophecy, and I'm like, oh, that's yeah. But now, after going through it, I'm like, prophecy really is such a big foundation. Okay.
Yes.
God being like, so this is gonna happen, and then humans being like, so that happened.
You got a vehicle.
Want to know the
That's a
future?
faith builder. I can
Here's the
see it.
future.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Seal it up. Be
Yeah.
patient. Wait until it's fulfilled. Yeah. Yeah. It's
Oh, really? I'm
I
sitting
mean, you
here.
can see how it like really
is?
How
You
you
sitting here
Oh my
doing it?
goodness,
yeah,
yeah.
it's backwards.
Especially in this version, I'm like, what did that even say?
That's
So
how things are worded.
I
I
called
mean, it's
the
just,
hell. Exactly.
And they can
Be
do the
taken
gearbox
different
for
ways,
$600.
so.
Right, and we're trying to study a text.
So I'm like,
in
we don't have
Aramaic
charges like
and
less than
Hebrew
$100 for a shop.
around 530 BC. That was then
Right now, he's
stored,
working by himself.
transliterated, and then translated again
from those
into
guys
English, which isn't a perfect translation to begin with.
Right.
And we're trying to make sense of what all these numbers mean and what all
He-
these
he had
verbs and
a
phrases mean.
Big business before and he sold it. And he's
2,600
just
years old.
starting back up.
Yeah,
And languages that have changed. I mean, if you read
yeah, the
English,
language they use back
And,
then, it's just like,
yeah,
you have to
everything
know some
I've
of
had
that
him
to
do, he's been
understand
good
it
at.
better.
absolutely. Yeah, if you read there's a YouTube channel that I like where this guy cooks like ancient recipes, and the English recipe
He doing
for
it at his house.
No, he's got a little
like a
shop.
turnover or something like pick good apples, good
It's part
spices,
of
put it in a
Oh,
coffin
it's
and
kind of
bake.
like your guys' place where there's like a whole
It's
bunch
like,
of shops.
what are you talking about?
He has
You
one.
know,
In a
and
coffin.
Put it in a coffin
And bake it.
bake it. It's like,
he only
what does that mean? You know,
Not my
That's the
coffin,
recipe.
can't be the coffin I'm thinking.
No measurements, it's just good apples, good spices, coffin bake. No
Yep.
temperature, no
Right,
time, no
right.
nothing, like figure it out. And
No temperatures on the fire.
right. Is the fire hot? It's the temp then.
I see flames.
Yeah.
Awesome.
What's up, girl?
What's up?
Okay.
Yeah.